This video is about terrestrial biomes. This slide shows different pictures of the various biomes we will be talking about. Now first off, let's talk about what a biome is. And a biome is an area that has a distinct climate and has distinct organisms. And the fact that we're going to be talking about terrestrial biomes tells us that we're going to be talking about biomes that occur on the land. We'll talk about aquatic biomes or marine biomes or biomes that occur in water at a later time. The first terrestrial biome that we're going to talk about is the tropical rainforest. Now, the tropical rainforest has seen a drastic decrease over the years. At once it was about 20% of the earth, and now it's at 7%. You can find tropical rainforests around the equator, mostly located between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn. If you look at the map here at the bottom of the screen, you will see that the tropical rainforests are bright green and they're located very, very near the equator. Now this slide did not come over very well from PowerPoint, so let me describe what should be on it. Okay, first off, it talks about the tropical, some characteristics of tropical rainforests. They have strong sunlight and they really have no seasons. Their climate is very consistent throughout the year. Now some things that are missing on this picture right here, the sun should be here and the seasons should be labeled, but they are not. And so if we imagine that this is, this would be summer. And the reason that I know that is because the northern hemisphere, that would be summer for us, the northern hemisphere is pointed towards the sun. This would be winter. This would be spring. And this would be fall or autumn. And the reason that I know that winter is over here is because, again, the northern hemisphere is tilted away from the sun, like we learned last semester. The tropical rainforests, their climate, like I said, it's very consistent, and they do not have seasons. It is humid there. It receives a lot of rain. And it's very warm. It never freezes. It's along the equator, so the temperature is very consistent, and the amount of rain that they get is very consistent throughout the year. So you can see that they do have somewhat of a dry period here, but they do get a lot of rain overall, and their temperature stays pretty much the same. The temperature is this line in degrees C. The soil characteristics of a tropical rainforest is very poor, but we do have a lot of plants that survive there, and it's because it's so humid and it's so warm that any plants or animals that die rapidly decay, and their nutrients are constantly being returned back to the soil. So that gives the soil some fertility that it wouldn't normally have. Some other characteristics of tropical rainforests are that you will see that the plants grow in layers, and those layers we call strata. And you can see here that there is a pretty heavy what we call canopy layer, and that's right here. And we have a lot of trees that are growing there, and that's where the vines will start to climb up to get up to the canopy. There is a lot of wildlife that lives in the canopy. And the plants here on the floor of the rainforest, they receive very little light because the canopy absorbs a lot of the sunlight and doesn't allow a whole lot of light to appear on the forest floor. So there is a small amount at the herb layer, but not a lot. And so one way that the plants have adapted to this lack of sunlight on the forest floor is that they end up with these really big leaves, and that's so that way they can snatch as much of that sunlight that gets through the canopy as much as possible so that they can undergo photosynthesis. The animals in the tropical rainforest, they're very colorful usually, and they tend to be highly poisonous. I don't know how many of you got a chance to go see the frog exhibit at the Georgia Aquarium, but it was a really great exhibit, and they had some of the poison dart frogs there. And really the most colorful and the prettiest ones tended to be the most poisonous ones. Okay, the next terrestrial biome that we're going to talk about is the temperate rainforest. And these are located throughout the world. And on Tuesday, I will show you pictures. I've been to the Hoh Rainforest in Washington State, and so that's right up in there. It's in the Pacific Northwest, and I've been to that rainforest, and I'll show you some pictures from there. These forests, they do get a lot of rain a year. They tend to be cool and humid, and considering the latitude that they're found in, they really do have mild winters and summers, considering where they're located. A lot of this is because they're located near the ocean, and that tends to help maintain a steady temperature year-round. There are a few species of evergreen on the windward slopes of a rainforest, but not a lot. What they do have is they have a nice undergrowth, meaning that the forest floor has a lot of ferns, a lot of thick undergrowth. You can also find redwoods. The part of the rainforest that I was in, there weren't a lot of redwoods, but you can find redwoods in these temperate rainforests, and the redwoods happen to be the tallest trees on Earth. They have many birds and mammal species, ranging from raccoons to wild pigs. There's some wolves there, deer, lots and lots of different bird and mammal species can be found in temperate rainforests. The next biome that we're going to talk about is the temperate deciduous forest. And these are the ones, these forests are the ones that you can find around here in the North Georgia mountains. You can tell that you're in a deciduous forest because the leaves will turn really beautiful colors in the fall. You'll get some nice beautiful oranges and yellows and reds, and they are really, really pretty in the fall. They will lose their leaves during the winter time, the trees will, and go dormant. They're located in the mid-latitude areas between the polar regions and the tropics, which is exactly where we live. And you get to experience 4 distinct seasons in temperate deciduous forests because of their exposure to warm and cold air masses. They get a moderate amount of precipitation, 30 to 100 inches a year, just depending on which forest you're in. And the trees there, the forest does grow in layers, so you will see some strata in these forests. The soil characteristics of a deciduous forest are rich and deep, and that's because you get enough rain in these forests to help aid in the decomposition of animals and plants, and you also get additional nutrients from the fallen leaves in the winter time. The animal life in a temperate deciduous forest, you can get migratory birds, and this is where you start to see some animals hibernate during the winter. So you'll see them in the fall trying to store up fat so that they can survive the cold winters. The next terrestrial biome that we're going to talk about is taiga. And taiga is found just below the Arctic Circle, and they are coniferous forest. And a coniferous forest is one that the trees have cones. Taiga, the characteristics of taiga, they have long cold winters. The precipitation is mostly in the form of snow. And because they're in such high latitudes, in the summer, they'll have almost constant daylight. So they have a very short growing season, but they get a lot of sun during that time. But then when the winter comes, it's long, cold, and dark. They're known to have conifer trees. These are trees that produce cones. They don't have leaves in the way that you typically think of leaves. They have needles. And these trees are designed to retain water, and they are acidic. In the taiga region, the soil forms very slowly. It's acidic. And the reason why it forms slowly is because there are few plants on the ground, and it's all because the summer growing season is very, very short. The animals found in the taiga region are mostly migrating birds, and this is where you really get to see those white camouflaged animals to make them more difficult to see, because most of their precipitation is indeed snow. They also will burrow under the ground. The next terrestrial biome is the tropical savanna. And the tropical savanna are located near the equator, just like the tropical rainforests, but the tropical rainforest, we get a lot of rain, where the tropical savanna get very little rain, less than 6 months of the year. They get 40 to 70 inches of rain, so they get very little rain compared to the tropical rainforest, but they do get more rain compared to a desert. The plants that you'll find in a tropical savanna, they tend to have long underground roots, because during the dry season, fires can be quite common. So they need to be able to survive those fires. The plants are perennials, meaning that they come back every year, year after year after year. They will come back. They don't need to be replanted and grown from seed every year. They will just regrow. And because they need to be able to survive, usually the plants are very thorny so that the animals won't eat them, since the growing season is short. They only grow during the wet season, so they want to try to stay alive as much as they can, and so we tend to find thorny plants there. The animals that you will find, mostly herbivores. They will follow the rains, so that way when they follow the rains, that's where the grasses can be found. And you will see herbivores of different heights. This is where you'll find giraffes being able to eat from the trees, and you'll see other herbivores grazing from the grasses. They do contain the largest number of grazing animals, so it's not unusual to see all kinds of different grazing species in tropicals. Of course, as you have the herbivores migrating with the grasses, you will also find the predators following these herds. They're very large land animals, like lions. The next one that we'll talk about are grasslands and prairies. These areas get a moderate amount of rain per year. They tend to be inland and not near the coast, so they will get very warm in the summer. They can also get very cold in the winter, but they can get very, very warm in the summer. And they're found at the mid-latitudes from 30 degrees to 50 degrees north. The plant adaptations, they will form mats to survive. Their root systems will form a mat pattern so that they can survive drought, because the grasslands and prairies will undergo a drought season. They can. But the plants will form, and underneath this picture right here, this word right here is dense. Again, that picture, it changed the font size, so that picture was in a different location in the PowerPoint. But they will form very dense mats to survive the drought, and that helps keep the soil in place. But these grasslands and prairies, the land is very flat, and so they do tend to get some wind, and especially during the dry season, they can be subjected to fires. So for those reasons, there aren't very many trees in the grasslands and prairies. The animals that you will find in grasslands and prairies seem to be very well adapted to the environment because, like I said, even though the summers can be really, really hot, the winters can be very, very cold. And so buffalo, the bison have adapted thick coats. And the coats must be this, let's add the word coats here. There we go. They have thick coats to withstand the cold winters. And some of the other animals, like prairie dogs and owls, they will live underground, not only to protect them from the fire and predators, but you don't have to go underground very far to maintain a consistent temperature. So they will go underground to protect them from various elements. These grasslands and prairies, they're found in the Midwest of the United States, and so it can be subjected to tornadoes as well. And so these animals will go underground to survive various things that could happen with the weather. All right, the next biome is the desert. And deserts, by definition, receive less than 10 inches of precipitation in any form per year. They're very, very dry. And if any of you have had chemistry, those of you that haven't, I'll just tell you that water helps the air and the climate maintain or anything really, anything with water in it will help maintain a constant temperature. And so when you don't have a lot of water in the daytime, it can get very, very hot in the desert, but at night it can get very, very cold. And that's one reason why Death Valley got its name, is because it's a very large desert and people would end up getting killed in the desert. It's hard to survive in Death Valley because A, there's not a lot of water to be found, but B, a lot of times people won't necessarily die of dehydration, but they will die from the extreme temperatures. The soils in the deserts are rich in minerals, but they are very poor in organic matter. And the thing is, in order for living thing or recently dead things to decompose, is you need water. A lot of the decomposers that you've learned in your food webs, they need water to live, and water is a very critical thing when it comes to the rate of decomposition. And deserts are just very dry, so things do not decompose very quickly. So the desert soil is very poor in organic matter. The plants that you will find in the desert, we call them succulents. And succulents are things like cactus. Sometimes you'll find plants that look like aloe. They tend to have very thick stems and leaves, and that's so that way they can store water. Since they don't get a lot of water in the form of precipitation, whatever water they can find that they can get out of the soil, they want to hold on to as best they can, so they have very thick stems and leaves. The flowers do tend to be very spiny and thorny, and sometimes they will have underground bulbs or really, really wide root systems, again, to seek out that very precious water that is in short supply in these desert areas. The animals, they have dry, scaly skin. It wouldn't make sense for be very difficult for them to maintain moist skin because there's not a lot of water. And then when you think about it, like when you go to the beach, if the sand, when you're wet, the sand tends to stick to you, but once your skin starts to dry off, it doesn't stick as much. So the dry, scaly skin is very useful to have in a desert. You really don't want to have any moist skin in the desert. Some of the animals do what we call estivate, and what that is that they will bury themselves in the ground and they'll sleep through the dry season. So it's similar to hibernation, where the animals will go to sleep during the winter time where the food is scarce. In the deserts, that's called estivating. And they do that during the dry season of the desert, even though the wet season isn't all that wet in the desert either. The animals are mainly nocturnal. A lot of them are nocturnal, mostly because there's no relief from the sun. So if you are active during the day, you're going to be out in the sun a lot. At least at night, the sun isn't beating down on you, making dehydration occur at a faster rate. So a lot of animals will be very active at night in the desert. The tundra is the last terrestrial biome that we will be talking about. And the tundra is found north of the Arctic Circle. This biome has no trees. It's primarily grasses and shrubs because the soil is permanently frozen, and we call that permafrost. It doesn't get a whole lot of rain a year, just slightly more than what a desert would receive. It's 7 to 40 inches of rain per year, and only 2 or 3 months of the year does the temperature even get above freezing. The summers are very brief and they are not very warm. They just get just above freezing, and the winters are very, very long and cold. Now, most of the plants that you will see are limited to mosses and lichens, since they can grow without soil, since the soil is permanently frozen. Any kind of plants that do grow, they will have very wide and shallow roots. Again, the soil is frozen, so the roots cannot go very deep. But they do need to be anchored against the wind because there are no trees in the tundra, so there's nothing to help break the wind. It's just the plants, and so they have to have really wide roots that can grip onto whatever surface they can find. The animals that you will find in the tundra are migratory. They do have camouflage, and they have very thick coats because their winters are so long and cold and the summers are short, so they need those thick coats to survive. And that is all that we have for terrestrial biomes.